Hello and welcome to the final episode of the Truth Within podcast. I feel like we should be cracking open the champagne, but we're going to be sharing some precious teachings, as always, and divine feminine wisdom today that's being remembered for our time. I'm your host, Jo Youle, and each week we have been bringing you conversations with Dee Delaney, author of the Truth Within trilogy. The journey of awakening is an ongoing process, and those who walk the path need to get a little bit more comfortable with uncertainty and constant change. So in this final episode of the Truth Within podcast, we're discussing how to get more comfortable with change, and as we find balance in the constant spiral and changing aspect of life. You can subscribe to our podcast, it's not too late, through sacredstoriesmedia.com or search The Truth Within on iTunes. Contact or connect directly with Dee via her website at deedelaney.co.uk, and you can also follow me, Jo Youle, on @Reset Rebel Productions on Instagram. If you are interested in coming on one of my podcasting retreats or creating your own podcast series, I produce creative audio for brands, businesses, and provide digital content across the board. Now, here we are again. Dee Delaney, welcome back to the final episode. It feels like it's just gone so quickly, this whole podcast series.
It does, Jo, but here we are at the end.
The final hurdle, and what a great topic to finish with. I'm loving the fact that we are going to be diving deep into the topics of uncertainty and change, and I guess that kind of speaks for itself, really. But in lots and lots of ways, we've all had our moments, I think, where we just don't want to change, and no one likes change. And I think, you know, we have it all sussed out, and then boom, life throws us one of those great big curveballs and takes you off in another direction. And it's all change again. And sometimes that's really, really fun, and other times it's not so fun. So I feel like there's always more work to be done, and the more life changes around me, and it certainly has changed around you on numerous occasions. Just unbelievable, really just crazy, crazy ways. So I'm not sure if this is the same for you, Dee, or you deal with it in the same ways, but it's definitely how it feels for me.
No, I battle with uncertainty and change the whole time. And for me, it's slightly odd because it's not the radical big stuff. I find that easy. But it's the little things, the small changes that I find so difficult. So moving to a new country, leaving my job, changing partners, all big life stuff, I kind of have no issue with. But if you try and change the little habits, like God forbid, take away my morning coffee, and I just can't live. That's it. It's game over. And it's like the ego has me caught in these beliefs that stops me from unveiling new layers of truth. In some ways, I've kind of told myself a story that coffee's good for me and I love it. So now it's become a belief, and if you take it away, something that I love then becomes something that I need, and then that's a whole different ball game. Then coffee becomes about looking at my addictive nature and what lies behind that, and suddenly the change becomes very scary because it might reveal something about me that I don't want to see. So, and I think that all these things in life that we approach change on uncertainty, like everything, with honesty and balance. You know, we can make a decision to meet change with grace, or we can fight it and be fearful. The choice is entirely ours. Like when I gave up my life in the West and moved to India, I was absolutely terrified of this change and fearful of the uncertainty it might bring. But now, 4 years on, and I'm considering moving on again, I'm kind of entering the experience with a different sense in my heart, that I'm kind of filled with excitement for the future because I know I'm much stronger than I think, and I know I can do it. But needless to say, you know, I'm under no illusion that it'll be easy, but I'm not scared anymore. And for me, that's great progress. That's how I know, you know, the work that I'm doing is serving me well.
It is scary, though, moving to another country. And, you know, it's the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown, and not knowing if you're going to make new friends, not knowing if you're going to meet like-minded people, not knowing how it's going to be, because our mind needs answers. That is our fear factor that rules our head. And obviously why we need to drop back into that heart space and just go with the feeling that changing country is going to be for the better, and knowing in our heart of hearts that really is where we want to be, and going with that rather than allowing our terror to infuse our decision making. And I think it's all part of change. Making big changes, big life decisions is challenging enough without this big pile of worry that we just have as humans in our head. So it's very interesting that we can be so certain about something 1 minute, as I find with myself particularly, and then totally do a full U-turn and completely change my mind. I'm sure I'm not alone when I talk about that. I think that's just such a hilarious thing that we suffer from. And sometimes I really suffer from just that, my constant mind changing. And I used to think that I had a real problem, and was really seeking a lot of help actually to try and change that about myself. And then I just started to accept that, that is just life. Life can be like that. That's part of me. It's part of everyone. It's not unique to me. It's just a bonkers part of the way that we can be at certain tumultuous periods. So I think that the secret is just to try not to sweat the small stuff, and ideally not worry about anything. Again, ridiculous advice, but that would be the absolute dream, because I think you have to just face up to the fact that it's all going to change again tomorrow anyway, no matter how much you worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point. We can only really give our energy to what's happening in the moment, because the rest is just future gazing and speculation and imagination. But if we meet what is there in the moment in the heart, then we don't feel overwhelmed with what's coming and the constant change moment to moment. And in truth, how we deal with uncertainty is what determines the quality of our life. That's why it's so important to catch the mind when it starts to wander. And that's why it's so important to train the mind to stay present, because that way we can cope with life as it changes moment to moment. It doesn't become something that we give energy to, because the future's never there. It's only here and now. And what I learned since writing my 3 books is that something that I believe to be absolute truth at one point in my life. And when I first started out writing the first book, I had very strong beliefs in some of this stuff that I was writing. I don't believe it anymore. And I say that with my hand on my heart. The truth was relevant to me then, but now it's not, because I've changed. And that's okay, because as we evolve, knowing becomes wisdom, and wisdom is timeless. Wisdom is when we embody the knowing and apply it to our life. And this is the journey of awakening, and it's an ongoing process. And those who walk this path need to get comfortable with uncertainty and constant change. Otherwise, life will be full of suffering.
Yes, it certainly will. And, I think adapting and being like an alchemist of your own creation, I think clearly you've done that so many times with all the different situations that you write about in your books that have happened to you over the course of time, and the death and the grief and the pain and the suffering. And you just have to keep reinventing yourself. You just have to keep, reimagining how it is that you are going to be in the aftermath of just all of this trauma. Because I think if you can't really become something new and change constantly and consistently, I don't know, I just think you're going nowhere. You've got no chance. You really do have to just keep rolling with the punches of life, and re-strategizing and resetting yourself. So I think the layers that kind of get unveiled as we evolve, and these contradictions that we often believe, again, just change. And that's challenging to accept, especially if you categorically felt that deep in your heart that you believe this to be your authentic truth. So I don't know, how do you even manage to deal with the constant change in the heart?
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? And I think we respond to new layers of truth in the way we respond to life, and through our ability to trust and have faith in the process. It's about that, pure and simple, trusting that this is how life is, and it's a constant spiral and ever-changing, ever-evolving. And I know through my experiences that when I have complete trust that something has been given to me is absolute, then there's no struggle. When I have complete trust, life is easy. It's simple, it's that word again, it's just simple. But at other times, you know how this feels, doubt creeps in and we overanalyze a situation and we question what comes, and then life gets tricky. And then I might seek advice and guidance from others rather than relying on my own intuition. And then things get complicated. So we kind of unravel everything we've taught ourselves. And, this is the problem when we desire something so badly and our intuition tells us we've got it wrong. We get stuck in this battle between heart and mind. And the mind can be really convincing. But, our inner knowing is never, ever, ever wrong. However hard we try to override it, it will always come back and tell you the truth. And we have to trust and we have to believe. Truth feels easy and uncomplicated. And if something does not feel simple and right, then guess what? It probably is not.
Absolutely, and I think truth is flow. Truth is real, and flow happens when we're just feeling into our own experience and our own reality, and not projecting or not taking on the fear, because I think the fear is just what rules everything. It really does, and that is a very complicated mess to unravel when the fear starts to overrule. And again, as you just explained, it's, obviously when the mind and the thoughts are starting to be believed, that all of that can become very messy in our heads. And I think probably to summarise everything we've discussed over the series would be a nice thing to do at this point, because we have covered quite a bit of ground over these last 11 episodes. This is episode number 11, and I think it's quite useful if we could maybe make some closing remarks. And I think what I really love is that your teachings build upon one another, and in a sense they sort of take you into a deeper part of you and your own truth. And it's clear from that trilogy that your soul has evolved through this process, in a sense that the person at the end of the book of 3 is just a very, very different one who arrived on Indian soil nearly 4 years ago when you began.
Yeah, it's true, huh? I am, without doubt, completely different to the Dee who left St. Albans, both inside and out. I kind of look different. I feel different. I have a new sense of confidence in myself that doesn't come from the ego. It comes from experiencing, learning and embodying these wisdoms. And I find myself coming back to these wisdoms when I get stuck in my own life. For example, like right now, I'm experiencing some real strong inner change, transformation of my consciousness on my inner plane, and it's making me feel uncomfortable, and it's been intensified here in Ibiza, where, as we've talked about, this strong energy pulls at your heartstrings, and it forces you to look at aspects of your being. And let's face it, some things I've been trying to avoid for years. So, there is a degree of feeling uncomfortable. So what do? I go back to the beginning. I sit in the silence and listen to my soul. Then I go into my heart space and ask her for guidance. I observe what comes in the moment, and in that moment, through my third eye, I see what I need to know. Then I make a choice to take this wisdom and use it for better or worse. And I know that what I need to do in my personal story, and whether or not I make the change, is up to me. And if I embody the wisdoms from the 10 ways of living in divine communion, I know that I will make changes necessary in my life so that I live in peace. And if I don't, then I know that the issue that's presenting itself will stay with me, and I will live the consequences with that. And that's okay too.
It is okay. And I think, you just have really learned so much over these 10 wonderful ways that we've been sharing to live in divine communion. And I think, the fact that you've managed to kind of embody that from the experiences that you've been through is just a testament to the strength of you and your feminine wisdom and power. That's what I have sort of taken from hosting and sharing these podcasts with you, is that you've just been through just unbelievable amounts of change. And I have to say that I'm very inspired and quite humbled. And it's been quite a journey, just sort of getting to know you and your story and the way that you've responded to it. And I think that's really an interesting thing for me, because I think deep down, we all know what it is that we actually really need to do to improve our lives. And when you come up against somebody that's really, really gone and changed their life and their mindset and really done some deep, deep work to recover from something, we can all get stuck in this endless merry-go-round of repeating our same patterns and making the same mistakes over and over again, and make excuses for it as well, and blame other people, or blame boredom or the weather or tiredness or our period or whatever it might be as a woman that, upsets the apple cart. But I think when we really dream for ourselves, really purely for ourselves, and what we really want for ourselves and what we really, imagine to be possible, I think those changes will come, and when we're ready for them. And it's a fine line between changing and staying stuck. And I think it's interesting to sort of ask finally what brings you to that point that made that final push. I mean, I guess it's fairly obvious from the things you've experienced to a degree, but what made you really take that final leap into the unknown?
It was boredom. For me, it's boredom. I get so bloody bored of hearing myself repeat the same old story, make the same old excuses, that to the point where my soul is practically screaming inside. And once I get to that point, I just go, enough, and I surrender, and I kind of figure out I have absolutely nothing to lose, because I've reached the end of my own personal tether. I'm just done. You're just done. And then I kind of go back to my 10 ways to live in divine communion, and I see that my behaviour is not loving towards me, and that's why I'm suffering. I take responsibility, and then I go into my story, and I see that my story is keeping me stuck. So I rewrite a new story. And when I do, then I step out of suffering and I live the best version of myself. And I do it with acceptance that there's no right and wrong. I don't beat myself up for my past behaviour. I kind of laugh now, actually, at some of the stuff, and I have a good giggle. And I accept I am and always will be exactly where I am supposed to be, right here, right now. And I rewrite my truth knowing that at any point this too can change, and I can change with it. And then I come full circle with acceptance and love for who I am in this moment. So it's so important just to be gentle with oneself, to protect your space, because as we know, it takes time to really embed these changes. Some people say it might take 21 days to change a pattern and behaviours. Others say 3 months. Or to really embody a new being on the inner planes, it could take 9 months. Because in effect, you're birthing a new you. So whatever changes we make, always remember to be gentle, loving and kind to yourself.
I think, in the yogic talk, this is called ahimsa, isn't it? It's non-violence to ourselves or others. And we've talked a little yogic philosophy on this podcast as well in the past. And I think that's just a really nice way to sort of round this whole thing up. And, I think really thinking deeply about our self-chat, our self-care, our self-love, and all of those wonderful points that you've raised over the course of the series are really great tools for others to maybe take a little piece of you away with them. If they haven't read your books, now might be a great time to get stuck in. So I think that's it. I'm sure we could have made another couple of series, really, let's be honest. We've got plenty to say to each other when it comes to these topics. But I think, we've come to the end of today's journey together, and it's been such a pleasure to walk through these 10 ways of living in divine communion with you. But before we say our final goodbye, as we always do in true tradition at the end of this podcast, is there one final message that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, so please know that truth cannot be known. It is ever changing and not yours to own.
What a wonderful way to end this fabulous series. And thank you so much to everyone that's listened and for tuning back in today and returning. And, throughout this series, we hope that you've enjoyed this experience as much as we have, giving it and sharing it with you. So please do remember, you can share these podcasts with your friends. You can review us on iTunes or leave us a little 5-star review if the fancy takes you. And don't forget that you can listen again to this episode or the entire series of the Truth Within podcast at sacredstoriesmedia.com on iTunes or from one of your other favourite podcast providers, of which there are so many right now. You can also connect with Dee via her social media pages or on Instagram and Facebook. That's Dee Delaney 01. And find out all about Dee's books, if you haven't read them already, on her website. That's www.deedelaney.co.uk. Or you can connect with me, Jo Youle, via my podcast services at resetrebelproductions.com. Big love until next time. We don't really know when that's going to be, but we might well be back at some point in the future. It's been absolutely wonderful to share this with you. See you next time.